what better way to welcome the first Sunday of the 2020 NFL regular season? What a better way to welcome it in than to hear 10 of my bold predictions? And before I hear people in the comment section saying, "Hey, those aren't very bold," you got to remember that bold and moronic are not synonymous, right? Just because these are bold predictions, it doesn't mean that they're idiotic predictions, right? These are not things that are out of left field. I'm not saying that Kalen Balaj is going to win the rushing title. These are 10 things that I think, some player related, some team related, that there's a really strong case that a lot of these end up happening just based on kind of logic, based on some of the moves that these teams have made over the offseason, some of the players they've acquired. I think that a lot of these quote-unquote bold predictions, I think they're going to make sense. So let's hop right into them. First things first, we have the Carolina Panthers. I think the Carolina Panthers lead the NFL in sacks this upcoming season. And you might be saying, well, how is that bold? Well, it's not necessarily bold. They were actually second in the league last year. But the thing is that they had 3 new starters on their defensive line. The only problem with that is I think that those 3 starters, and the fact that they're getting Kawaan shortback, they're getting Derrick Brown, who they drafted out of Auburn, they're getting Yetur Gross-Matos out of Penn State from that second-round pick. They're getting those guys, add in Brian Burns, who had a fantastic rookie year last year. To me, the Carolina Panthers, that might be one of the best front fours in the entire NFL. And as a result, I think that they lead the NFL in sacks come the end of the regular season. And next up, I can already tell people are going to hate this one. I think that Leonard Fournette, he emerges as Tampa Bay's best offensive player in 2020. And I can already see people freaking out because how is this scrub that was cut by the worst team in the league just a week and a half ago, how is he going to be the best player on a team with Tom Brady, with Rob Gronkowski, with Chris Godwin, with Mike Evans, etc.? That's the greatest QB of all time. That's debatably the greatest tight end of all time. That is the best wide receiver duo in the league at this point, bar none. Yet this guy, he's going to be the best player on that offense? Absolutely, not even a question. Why? Because I always say it, a player's performance is indicative of some interaction between their individual talents and their situation, right? And Fournette, his talent is through the roof. We all know that. There was a reason the Jaguars took him so high, and there's a reason he's been able to succeed to the point that he has in the absolute dumpster fire that's been that Jaguars situation. And if you don't believe me that it's a dumpster fire, just wait until you see what he's able to do this upcoming season. As long as Tom Brady, as long as he's still able to force defenses to respect the pass, like Gardner Minshew wasn't, then Leonard Fournette, to me, as long as those safeties, they're out of the box, those linebackers, they have to play out towards the hashes to, make sure they're able to cover the quick passes to Godwin, the quick stuff to Evans, the quick stuff to Gronk. This man, he's going to have open rushing lanes all day, and as a result, he is going to have the best season of anybody on that Tampa offense in 2020. But I had you guys on a high note. They're going to unfortunately miss the playoffs. And I know some people are probably saying, well, how the heck is that going to happen? 7 teams now go from each conference. Well, I don't think that they really have a chance to beat out the Saints. As you guys will hear later, I think the Saints have one of, if not the most talented roster in the entire NFL. So then we're talking about just divisionally, I think they're in a pretty tough division. I think the Falcons could take a game from them. I think the Panthers are vastly improved, as you guys heard on that last slide. Whereas I think a lot of the other divisions, for example, the Eagles and the Cowboys, they have 4 free wins when you face the Giants and the Redskins, as well as a relatively easy schedule. In the North, the Vikings and Packers, even though I think they're worse teams than the Buccaneers right now, they only have to play the Bears and Lions 4 times a year. I think that that's a substantial advantage when, in my opinion, you're fighting for wild card spots. And I wouldn't be shocked if this Tampa Bay team, if they had just miss out and they end up as that 8 seed in 2020. And while the 43-year-old Tom Brady unfortunately misses the playoffs in his first year in Tampa Bay, Cam freaking Newton, he carries on the New England tradition. He takes over right where Tom Brady left off. He's going to have his best season since 2015. He's going to win Comeback Player of the Year while leading the Patriots to a division title. And for some people that might not be that bold, right? The Patriots, they always go to the playoffs. How is this bold? Well, have you seen that defense? Have you seen how many players have opted out in New England? this is going to be an uphill climb for Cam and really just the Patriots team in general. But for him on that offensive side of the ball, there is so much talent around him that I'm very excited to see him work behind and work with. Whether it's that offensive line, which is one of the best in the league, whether it's that stable of running backs, whether it's N'Keal Harry, Julian Edelman, guys on the perimeter who I think can make plays and are really substantially better than any supporting cast that he's had in Carolina. I think that Cam Newton's in for a career year as long as he's still even 85% of who he was 2-3 years ago. I think that this man, he put him with debatably the best coach of all time. Maybe it's not even a debate. I think that's a scary combination. And unfortunately for the Bills, for the Dolphins, for the Jets, I think it's going to be a combination that wins them the AFC East in 2020. And next up, this one probably has a lot of people scratching their heads, right? As many casual football fans, they probably don't even know who this man, Jonathan Allen, is. I think you're going to know exactly who he is in 2020, as to me, he's going to emerge as a top 5 defensive tackle in the NFL. There's so many eyes trained on Chase Young. And, for an offensive coordinator, let's just say the Eagles coming into week 1, you are game planning how to slow down and try and neutralize Chase Young. Well, that focal point in 2019, that was Jonathan Allen. And now he's going to have the luxury of being single blocked on a higher percentage of plays, blocks that he's going to be able to feast on, essentially. And, I don't want you to think this is some random prediction, right? We saw this with Chris Jones when they brought in Frank Clark. We saw this with DeForest Buckner or Arik Armstead when they bring in Nick Bosa. We've seen this when, hey, they bring in a dominant pass rusher, the interior defensive tackle that now, the target's taken kind of off his back to an extent. That man, he emerges as a kind of breakout player. And I think that Jonathan Allen, he's next in line. While all the eyes are on Chase Young, I think this man, he kind of comes out of nowhere, let's say, and becomes a household name for the most part as far as defensive tackles go. And next up, staying in the NFC East, I think that the Eagles and Cowboys both win 10-plus games respectively for the first time in a single season since 2014. And just so you guys, you don't think that that's some lame prediction that happens all the time, I had to put in there. It's been 6 years since we saw both of these teams win double-digit games. I think that streak is snapped this year. As back when Mike and I, when we were looking at the Cowboys and Eagles rosters for our team recap series right after the draft, I think we were just astounded at how deep both of these teams are and how stacked the top ends are as well. Obviously, there have been some alterations. The Brandon Brooks injury, that's a killer. The Alshon potential injury, the Miles Sanders question marks, the Clinton Dix release in Dallas. There have been a couple slight alterations, but at the end of the day, these teams are so talented. I think that for the first time in 6 years, they both win 10-plus games, whether it's the additional Jalen Reagor and getting so many of those offensive pieces back healthy in Philly, as well as Darius Slay. You can't forget about him. And in Dallas, oh, man, just adding CeeDee Lamb to that offense, as well as, Gerald McCoy, Dontari Poe on that defensive line. It is just an interesting sight to see who's going to win this division. If I had to, give you a prediction right now, I'd say the Cowboys, just because there are more questions with the Eagles' health. But I do think both teams win double digits. The only thing that sucks, one of them is going to have to be a wild card team. But at the end of the day, to me, they both make the playoffs pretty handily. And speaking of a team that I think doesn't make the playoffs, I'm going to go with the Arizona Cardinals. So many people are going to be upset about this because this seems to be the go-to team when people are talking about, oh, who can go worst to first? Kyler Murray, you have DeAndre Hopkins, you got Kenyon Drake, Larry Fitz, Christian Kirk. Oh, man, they are so much better than they were a year ago. Well, to me, they're kind of like the Browns of 2019. And, for people who don't really understand the point of comparison, the weapons are all there, right? But the problem is, just like the Browns, who had Chris Hubbard and Greg Robinson as their tackles coming into last season, and as a result, we saw Baker Mayfield. He was under pressure constantly. Kyler Murray, he doesn't have much better. This team, this organization, they kind of ignored their offensive line in a sense that you're starting next season with DJ Humphries and Kelvin Beachum. I don't really love it personally. I think Kyler Murray, he's going to be trying to run for his life, and I don't know if that's how you're going to win football games in Arizona. I think that defense, the defensive line especially, is very, very bad. Obviously, you have 3 top 30 players, top 40 players in my eyes, in Patrick Peterson, in Chandler Jones, in DeAndre Hopkins, but I don't think that just 3 stars can propel you to the playoffs in this modern NFL. Teams are too talented, And I just think we're a year too early on the Cardinals. The only thing I hope is that, as we saw with Baker last year, where everybody kind of sours on him, I hope that people don't sour on Kyler just because he, quote unquote, underperforms. We got to remember that, these players transitioning from college to the NFL is not an easy feat, and you can't expect him to do it overnight. And even though he's already had 1 year, I say we give him 2-3 before we expect them to really take that next step, especially in a stacked NFC West. And as we leave DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona, we're going to come to Julio Jones in Atlanta, where I think Julio, he's going to post his best statistical season to date. And you might be saying, how the heck is he going to beat 1,800 yards and 8 touchdowns like he had back in 2015? Well, I'm going to tell you how. It's because he has the best supporting cast he's had since 2015. You want to talk about getting an upgrade at running back. Obviously, Todd Gurley, as long as his knees are healthy, this man is a top 10 running back easily. Hayden Hurst. You want to talk about a two-dimensional tight end? Sure, he might not be the dynamic receiver that Hooper was, so he might not get as many targets through the air, but he's going to help so much in terms of that play-action passing game. Are they running? Are they passing? He's going to help the unpredictability of this offense go through the roof, but most importantly, it's going to be the first time in a while since Roddy White that Julio Jones has really had a potentially dominant weapon opposite of him. And the last time he had that, when he did have Roddy White, that's when we saw 1,800 yards and 8 touchdowns. And, so many eyes are on Calvin Ridley now that, his route running, he's one of the most crisp young guys in the league. People think he's going to be the breakout candidate. Well, in reality, I think that worry about Calvin Ridley means that they're not going to have, a safety bracketing Julio Jones over the top every play. And if you don't do that this year, to me, with an improved offensive line, Matt Ryan should have more time. You're going to have to watch out for big number 11 in Atlanta. To me, he's going to have his best season of his life. And this next prediction right here, it's probably the most bold that you're going to hear from me today. That's why I had to leave the text off the screen, because in a world where everybody loves to clown the Cleveland Browns, I woke up feeling dangerous. I think Baker Mayfield, not to steal his quote, but I think that he's going to be an MVP candidate in 2020 because, yes, he had the weapons last year. Did he disappoint? Yes, absolutely. You'd think when somebody has Odell, Jarvis, Njoku, Chubb, Kareem Hunt, you'd think that he would be able to get it done, right? Well, you're partially right because football's not just a 7-on-7 game. There's 5 offensive linemen in front of him for a reason, and we got to remember that he had 2 absolute turnstiles at right and left tackle last year in Greg Robinson and Chris Hubbard. Outside of Bobby Massey and Charles Leno in Chicago, I think the Cleveland Browns had one of the worst tackle duos in the league. And unlike the Bears, for example, who, they obviously don't want to protect Mitch Trubisky. They don't really care. They're bringing both those tackles back to start again this year. The Cleveland Browns front office, all credit to them, they attacked that tackle position more aggressively than even I thought they would have. Because in free agency, what they went out, boom, they paid big money for Jack Conklin. And Jack Conklin, for those who aren't familiar, that is a big time player, right tackle out of Tennessee, who was an absolute beast with the Titans. He's fantastic. He's great as a pass blocker, solid as a run blocker, and he really is the best tackle the Cleveland Browns have had since Joe Thomas, right? Well, I thought they'd be done there. I thought they would settle for, someone good on Baker's front side and maybe some questionable, Chris Hubbard on Baker's backside. Well, nope. They went out and addressed the hole again. They double dipped. They went back for more, and they drafted Jedrick Wills in the first round of the 2020 NFL draft. And for those who aren't familiar, Wills out of Alabama, he was my favorite tackle prospect in the draft. I think that they absolutely got 2 anchors at that right tackle and left tackle spot on this offensive line for years to come. And who's going to reap the rewards of that mostly? Baker Mayfield, to me, MVP candidate. I don't want to say he's going to win it, but you got to remember, when it's a narrative-based award, a guy who takes his team from rags to riches, from the Cleveland Browns to, potentially a playoff team, maybe even better, I think that he's going to have a really strong case. Statistics aside, I just think that people are going to get behind him once they see what he's able to do in Cleveland this season. And as a result, MVP candidate. I don't want to say the winner, but I definitely think he's going to be a top 3 to 5 guy. Next up, who's going to be probably the second biggest recipient of those new additions at that tackle spot? To me, Odell Beckham, right? They also added Austin Hooper. I should have mentioned that, who, as we know, last year, top 5 tight end in the league. He's going to command a lot of attention from those safeties. You're going to have those tackles, giving Baker Mayfield more time, giving him more time to execute some nice routes, some good crisp moves to gain separation from his defenders and ultimately get open. As a result, I think Odell Beckham, he's going to come back and have an all-pro season, which, if you're keeping score, that means I think Julio Jones and Odell are going to be your first-team all-pro wide receivers. But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there because it's not just a good offense. I do think this team has a pretty solid defense. And as a result, I think that the Browns make the playoffs for the first time since 2002. That, everybody was saying it last year, and they were sorely disappointed. Well, I think now the pieces are in place to where this is a very legitimate thing to say. This isn't even a bold prediction in my eyes. It's just a prediction that people made once and they were spurred on. They touched the oven once and it was hot, so they're never going to touch it again. Well, the oven's off now. Now the Browns, they're firing on all cylinders, and I think that this team, in my opinion, is really one of the best in the AFC, if we're being completely honest. I wouldn't be shocked if the Cleveland Browns win their division. Obviously, you have the Steelers, you have the Ravens, the Bengals. They have some promising young players, but to me, this Browns team from front to back, they're one of the most loaded in the league. It doesn't help that Grant Delpit, he's out for the year. Obviously, safety out of LSU. Was looking forward to seeing him. Greedy Williams, we don't exactly know when he's going to be back from his injury, but I think they can withstand those injuries for the first couple weeks, and really as long as their head coaching situation is finally in order, I think this Cleveland Browns team not only makes the playoffs for the first time since 2002, but I think they have a real chance to win the division. With that being said, I don't want the Steelers and Ravens fans to have a stroke, right? I think that 3 teams make the playoffs from the AFC North in 2020, and I'll be honest, if there were only 6 teams in the playoffs, if there wasn't the expanded third wild card, I would still think that 3 teams make the playoffs from the AFC North. I think that if we're talking about the AFC in general, I think that the AFC North has 3 of the 4 to 5 best teams. I think that outside of the Chiefs, it's very hard to find any rosters that stack up to that of the Ravens, that of the Steelers, that of the Browns. I don't want to predict the order. I feel like it'd be too easy to say, oh, the Ravens, because, we've seen what they've done these past couple of years. But honestly, getting Big Ben back, as long as he hasn't fell off a cliff, adding Chase Claypool, adding some pieces just all around that team. And then, as I said, Cleveland, I think that team has made massive improvements. And as a result, I think 3 teams make the playoffs in the AFC North for the first time in a little bit. And next up, and lastly, probably the least bold prediction of them all, honestly, I think that Drew Brees and the Saints win the 2020 Super Bowl. And the only reason I'm saying this isn't as bold as most is because I believe the Saints have the 4th highest odds to win the Super Bowl. But I feel like at this point, anybody saying somebody outside of Kansas City and Baltimore, they are kind of going out on a limb, and I'm going to do exactly that with the Saints. This Saints team, their backups, their second string is better than most first strings in the league. If you watch Mike and I's team recap video of the New Orleans Saints, this team is so deep. They're so talented in terms of, now they patched up that wide receiver 2 hole on offense with Emmanuel Sanders. They have so many talented players on defense. They brought back Malcolm Jenkins. We're going to see Marshawn Lattimore, Janoris Jenkins. We're going to see that fantastic defensive line. We're going to see that great offensive line back again. Alvin Kamara just signed a massive extension. And ultimately, I think that Drew Brees, even though people are saying that, his arm's kind of falling off a little bit, he can't throw the ball 40 yards. Well, hey, when you have this much talent around you, I don't think you need to have Patrick Mahomes' arm to win the Super Bowl. And ultimately, that's why I think that they're going to win it, because they are, from top to bottom, in my opinion, the most talented team in the league. And that's why I think that come February, they're going to be holding up the Lombardi. That's all I got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed my bold predictions. I'll hopefully be back to hit you guys up with either a top 100 video or maybe give out my first mic'd up game ball later this week. But with that being said, for this video, I'm mic'd up. Now I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys.